I never thought there would come a day when my own parents would look me in the eye and tell me that my children were not welcome in their home. But now here I was, standing in my small kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, the cold granite countertop seeping into my fingertips as I gripped it for balance. My mother was on the other end of the line, her voice light, almost cheerful. Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving this year. For a moment, my heart eased, the tension of the day melting away. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Despite the undeniable fractures in our relationship, despite the way I had always felt the favoritism toward Daniel and his family, I still wanted to believe that family gatherings mattered to them. I smiled, almost allowing myself to forget the past wounds. My mind filled with memories of my parents' large kitchen, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filling the air, the flickering glow of the fireplace, the warmth of familiar embraces. Of course, Mom, what's the plan this year? A brief silence passed, just long enough to send the first small crack through my sense of security. My mother cleared her throat as if preparing for something difficult. This year, we're doing things a little differently. A small dinner, just the adults, something more intimate, you understand. The smile on my lips froze. What do you mean? I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. Well, she hesitated. You know, a quieter evening, no kids running around, just a chance for the adults to enjoy dinner without interruptions. A creeping unease tightened around my chest. So no kids at all, my voice was quieter now but sharper. Another pause, then reluctantly she added, not exactly. I swallowed hard, the coldness spreading down my spine. What do you mean, Mom? She sighed, and in that moment I knew something was very wrong. Ally, you know we love the kids, but Emma and Lucas, they're very energetic, and we just think it would be better if you left them with a sitter this time. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter, nails pressing into the smooth wood. Just my kids, I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Ally, my mother's voice was cautious now, as if bracing for my reaction. So I bit my lip, a burning sensation rising in my chest. What about Daniel? He's still bringing his kids, isn't he? Silence. I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me twist painfully. The answer was obvious, but for some foolish reason, I still wanted to hear her say it. I still wanted to believe she wouldn't be so cruel. Daniel and Sophie are coming, she admitted, her voice softening as if that could somehow soften the blow. But you know how their kids are, they're quieter, more well-mannered, it's just easier to have them at the table. A fire ignited inside me. More well-mannered, more refined, easier. The words sliced through me like a blade over and over again. Emma and Lucas weren't enough. They didn't deserve a place at their grandparents' table. Daniel's kids were always the golden ones, the model students, the polite and proper little replicas of their parents. And mine. What was wrong with them? That they laughed a little louder, that they ran a little faster, that they lived a little bigger. That they were mine. I had always tried to be the good daughter, tried to make them proud. What had I done wrong? I had raised my children to be kind, respectful, loving. They looked up to their grandparents with wide, adoring eyes, never realizing they were nothing more than an inconvenience. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my place in their world. But maybe I had never even stood a chance. I closed my eyes, the sting of tears burning at the edges, but this time I didn't bow my head. I took a slow, steady breath, and when I spoke, my voice was clearer than ever. If my children aren't welcome, then neither am I. A long silence. Then a sharp inhale from my mother. Suit yourself. And the line went dead. I stood there for a few seconds, phone still cold in my grip. There was no pain anymore, no shock. Only certainty. From the living room, I heard the bright, unburdened laughter of Emma and Lucas. I turned, watching them build a pillow fort, their faces glowing with excitement. They had no idea that just moments ago, the people they loved had cast them aside as if they didn't matter. I tightened my grip on the phone, my heart sinking before settling into something firm. I had spent my entire life trying to be the daughter they wanted. But not anymore. They had chosen to cut out my children. Now it was my turn to cut them out. I stood there frozen in my own kitchen long after my mother had hung up. This was the same kitchen where I had always felt safe. The same place where I made breakfast for Emma and Lucas every morning, where their laughter filled the air as I teased them or told them silly stories. But now the space felt empty. Cold, isolated. My parents had made their choice, they had drawn their line without hesitation. We love the kids, but only when it's convenient, when they don't disrupt, when they can sit still and behave without ruining our perfect dinner. And what about me? I had spent my whole life trying to make them happy. How many times had I swallowed the sting of being overlooked just to earn a fraction of their love? How many times had I watched the blatant favoritism toward Daniel and told myself it didn't matter, as long as I still had a place in this family? But now there was no place for me anymore. I stepped out of the kitchen, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Laughter echoed from the living room, Emma and Lucas, crawling through the blanket fort they had built, their eyes full of innocent joy. They didn't know. They didn't know that the people they loved had just decided they weren't good enough. A slow, simmering anger burned inside me. Not just because of this phone call, but because of every phone call before it. I remembered all the times I had called my mother, excited to tell her about Emma's school achievements, only for her to quickly steer the conversation back to Daniel's successes. I remembered birthdays when they arrived late, bringing last-minute, thoughtless gifts for my children while Daniel's kids always received the best and the most. I remembered Christmases where my parents held Daniel's children close, kissing them with warmth, while Emma and Lucas received little more than a polite smile. I had tried for too long, and now I saw it for what it was. They had never truly valued me. They had never truly valued my children. A deep exhale left my lips. No more anger, no more sadness, just certainty. I walked into the living room and sat down beside my children. They looked up at me, their wide eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, do you want to come inside the fort?" Lucas asked, his voice eager. I smiled, and for a moment, the weight of that phone call faded. "Of course, sweetheart." I crawled inside with them, feeling their small bodies pressed against mine, their warmth surrounding me. And suddenly a thought surfaced, sharp and undeniable. This is my real family. My parents could cast me aside, they could choose to erase me from their table. But I would never do that to my children's. My parents had made their choice. Now it was my turn. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and typed out a single message to my mother. If my children aren't welcome, then neither am I. No explanation, no pleading, no negotiation. Minutes later, a reply popped up. "Ally, stop overreacting, it's just one dinner." I let out a quiet, bitter laugh, then deleted the message without responding. No, this wasn't just about dinner. This was a boundary. This was change. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval anymore. I don't remember how long I stood there in the kitchen after deleting my mother's message. The room remained unchanged. The soft glow of the overhead lights, the faint scent of dinner still lingering in the air, Lucas's half-full glass of water sitting on the counter. But my world had shifted. I had thought that when I walked away, they would chase after me, that they would realize their mistake, that they would try to make things right. But they didn't. Instead, they sent a short, detached response, as cold as the way they had always treated me. "Stop overreacting, it's just one dinner." Just one dinner. Just one dinner, and they were willing to discard my children. Just one dinner, and Daniel's kids were still welcome while mine were cast aside as an inconvenience. The familiar ache rose in my chest, but this time it didn't consume me. I let it in, let it remind me that this wasn't the first time. I remembered every conversation where my mother barely listened before shifting the focus back to Daniel. I remembered every birthday they had forgotten while Daniel was celebrated like an event of the year. I remembered every holiday when Emma and Lucas eagerly waited to see their grandparents, only to receive fleeting, indifferent hugs and half-hearted smiles. I had convinced myself they didn't mean it, that they didn't realize what they were doing. But now I knew. They knew, they had always known. And they never cared. A deep breath escaped my lips. No more anger, no more expectations. Only acceptance. I had lost them. Not today, not because of this dinner. I had lost them a long time ago. I walked out of the kitchen, my feet moving on their own toward the living room where Emma and Lucas were still playing. Emma looked up, her eyes full of joy. "Mommy, do you want to come inside the fort?" Lucas beamed, patting the pillow beside him. "There's room for you, Mommy." I looked at them, my two beautiful, perfect children. Two children who never deserved the coldness of their grandparents. Two children who deserved far better. And a sharp, undeniable thought sliced through my mind like a blade. If my parents didn't want them, then they didn't need my parents. I had spent too many years trying to fit into a world where I never truly belonged, trying to win the approval of people who had never seen my worth. But Emma and Lucas deserved more than that. They deserved a mother who was strong enough to walk away, A mother who didn't waste her love on people incapable of returning it. I smiled a quiet, determined smile, then knelt beside them. Of course, sweetheart, I said, crawling into the pillow fort. They giggled, clapping in excitement as I nestled between them. Out there, the world could be cold. But here, under this roof, love was unconditional. The next morning when I woke up, I didn't feel bitter anymore. My phone buzzed with a new message from Daniel. I opened it, unsurprised by what I saw. Mom says you're making a big deal out of nothing. Why do you always have to create problems? It's just one dinner. You're really willing to cut off the whole family over something so small. I scoffed. They still didn't get it. No, this wasn't small. I typed my response. If my children aren't welcome, then I don't need a place in this family. I hope you and Mom have a wonderful Thanksgiving. This time, I didn't wait for a reply. I set my phone down, inhaled deeply, and stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was clear and blue. No more expectations, no more fear. Just freedom. And for the first time, I was truly ready to live without needing their approval. Thanksgiving was approaching, but this time there were no reminders, no check-ins, no last-minute invitations. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't wondering if my mother would realize her mistake. I wasn't hoping that anyone would say, "We miss you, bring the kids." No, they had made their decision. And so had I. But strangely, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. I had expected to wake up full of regret. I had expected to wonder if I had been too harsh. But I didn't. Instead, I felt light. I watched Emma and Lucas giggle as they smeared flour on each other's faces while helping Liam make pancakes. No rushing, no pressure, no need to create some perfect dish to prove my worth in my parents' home. Just real family. Just peace. But then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, Mom. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Maybe this was an apology. Maybe just this once she understood. Ally, she said, her voice stiff, a little forced. I just wanted to check in on you. I said nothing, I waited. We still hope you'll come to dinner, she continued, this time softer. Nothing has changed, but I thought maybe you'd had time to calm down. Calm down. My grip on the phone tightened. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad. But I had changed. I had thought they might regret it. I had thought they might realize what they had lost. But they didn't. They thought I was the problem. They thought I was the one who needed to adjust. They thought I would come back just like every other time. I took a slow, steady breath. My voice was calm but firm. Mom, I was clear. If my children aren't welcome, neither am I. The silence stretched so long I could hear her breathing. Then she laughed softly. A laugh I knew all too well. Why do you always have to make such a big deal out of everything, Ally? It's just one dinner. Why do you have to complicate things? A slow, simmering heat rose in my chest. I had heard this before. You're too sensitive. You overreact to everything. Why can't you be more like Daniel? I let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no humor in it. No, Mom, this isn't just a dinner. This is the first time I've set a boundary with you, and I don't think you like that very much. Her voice sharpened. Ally, you're hurting this family. No, Mom, I murmured. I'm just refusing to let you hurt me anymore. She inhaled sharply as if restraining herself. Finally, her tone turned cold. Suit yourself. And she hung up. No apology. No attempt to fix things. Just an outright refusal to acknowledge that I had changed. I set my phone down. It didn't ring again. No messages, no follow-ups. But I knew it wasn't over. They wouldn't give up on me so easily. Not because they loved me, but because I had always been useful. I was the one they called when they needed help with their computer. I was the one who showed up when something needed fixing. I was the one who planned the family gatherings, made sure everything was organized. I was the convenient daughter. But I wasn't convenient anymore. And they were about to feel that loss. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. Your mother and I need help with something. Can you stop by? I stared at the screen, a bitter amusement creeping over me. Not an apology. Not a how are you. Just another request. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message popped up. What's wrong with you? We're family. When family needs help, you don't just turn your back on them. I took a deep breath. And then I deleted the message. I wasn't the daughter they could summon whenever they wanted and discard when they didn't. They had chosen to exclude me and my children from their dinner table. Now they would learn what that felt like. That night, while they sat down to dinner with Daniel and his family, I curled up on the living room floor with Emma and Lucas, the three of us wrapped in a warm blanket, eating popcorn and watching cartoons. Lucas nuzzled into me, whispering, "I love you, Mommy." Emma squeezed my hand, her bright eyes full of warmth. "I love you too." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I didn't need my parents' approval anymore, because I already had my real family. And I would never abandon them the way my parents had abandoned me. Thanksgiving had passed, and I thought that was the end of it. No angry texts, no lectures, just silence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't dreading stepping into my parents' house. I wasn't bracing for the inevitable comparison to Daniel. I wasn't pretending not to notice the cold glances they cast at my children. For the first time, I had chosen not to play their game. But this freedom, it didn't feel the way I thought it would. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt lighter. But instead, there was an odd emptiness in my chest. I walked into the kitchen, glancing at my children, fast asleep on the couch after an evening of playing beneath a mountain of blankets. And yet, even though I knew I had done the right thing, a small part of me still waited. For an apology. For a message of regret. For a simple acknowledgement from my mother, "Ally, I was wrong, I miss you." But it never came. And I realized then it never would. Because in their eyes, I wasn't someone to be apologized to. I was someone who owed them an apology. Their silence lasted a week. Then they changed tactics. On Saturday morning, as I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, a text from Daniel appeared on my phone. "Mom says you're blowing things out of proportion. Why do you always have to create drama?" I sighed, the words feeling all too familiar. Why was I always the one causing trouble? Why couldn't I just make things easier for them? I put my phone down without responding. But less than an hour later, it buzzed again. "Mom and Dad need your help with something. Can you stop by?" I closed my eyes and took a slow, deep breath. They weren't sorry. They hadn't realized their mistake. They just wanted me back in my place. The daughter who was always there when they needed something. The daughter who stayed silent when she was treated unfairly. The daughter who helped, who gave, who never asked for anything in return. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I pressed delete. And I didn't respond. The next day, my phone rang. This time, it was my mother. I didn't want to answer, but I knew that if I didn't, she would keep calling. I picked up, my voice steady, "Mom." She sighed long and heavy, as if she were the one suffering. "Ally, are you really going to let things stay like this? We're family." I pressed my lips together. Family. A family that had no problem casting my children aside when they didn't fit into their perfect image. A family that only called when they needed something from me. I had been quiet for too long. "Mom," I said, my voice calm but unwavering, "you need to understand something. I spent my whole life trying to make you and Dad happy, but I'm not doing it anymore." "Ally, you're taking this too far." "No," I cut her off, my tone sharp. "You're not listening to me. This time you have to listen. I'm not that little girl you could manipulate anymore. I'm not the daughter who takes whatever scraps of affection you decide to give. I deserve a respect, and I won't accept anything less." Silence. A long, heavy silence. And then when she realized I wouldn't bend, her voice turned cold. "You're going to regret this." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Not because I was afraid she was right, but because I knew she truly believed that I was the one in the wrong. "Goodbye, Mom." And I hung up. When I set my phone down, something in me felt different. No more doubt. No more guilt. Just certainty. I didn't need them. I didn't need to chase after love that they were never willing to give. I didn't need a seat at their table. I walked into the living room where Emma and Lucas were building a puzzle with Liam. They looked up at me, and in that moment I knew I had done the right things. I had chosen my family. And there was one thing I knew for sure. I would never let my children grow up believing they had to earn love. They would always know that they were loved. No conditions. No limitations. No need to prove anything. The days after my last call with my mother were eerily quiet. No texts from Daniel. No calls from my father. No attempts from my mother to pull me back in. At first, I felt relieved. I thought finally they understand. Finally, they realized that I wasn't coming back. I enjoyed the silence. I took Emma and Lucas to the park without worrying about my phone buzzing with demands. I cooked with Liam, uninterrupted by my mother's constant need for something. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had truly escaped their control. But I was wrong. The storm hadn't passed. It had only been gathering strength. On Monday morning, as I was cleaning up after breakfast, Liam walked into the kitchen holding a large envelope. "This came in today," he said, setting it on the table in front of me. I glanced down, my pulse slowed when I recognized the sender's name. Them. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling slightly as I tore the envelope open, pulling out the stack of legal papers inside. The moment I read the first few lines, my body went cold. A petition for grandparent visitation rights. No, no, this couldn't be happening. I flipped through the pages, my breath coming faster as I took in the reality of what they were trying to do. They were suing me. They were trying to force me through the court system to allow them access to Emma and Lucas. I stared down at the papers, my mind spinning. They hadn't been able to manipulate me. They hadn't been able to guilt me into coming back. So now they were trying to take control another way. Liam saw the change in my expression and placed a steady hand on my back. "Ally, are you okay?" I was, but I wouldn't let them win. The rest of the day, I couldn't think about anything else. I pictured my mother sitting in some lawyer's office, playing the role of the heartbroken grandmother, claiming she was unfairly cut out of her grandchildren's lives. I imagined my father nodding along, acting as if he hadn't been the one to exclude my children first. I could already hear them in court, spinning their version of the truth, how they loved Emma and Lucas, how they just wanted to stay connected as a family. But I knew better. This wasn't about love. This was about power. This was about control. They couldn't stand the fact that I was living a life that didn't revolve around them. So now they were trying to use the law to pull me back in. But there was one thing they didn't know. I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. I picked up my phone and called my lawyers. I had the texts. I had the emails. I had the proof that they had never truly cared about Emma and Lucas, only about their own image, their own needs. I had enough truth to tear apart the story they were trying to create. And this time I wouldn't back down. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for Emma and Lucas. For their right to grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally. For their right to be protected from people who saw them as nothing more than pawns in a power struggle. The next morning, I filed my formal objection with the court. When my mother's number appeared on my screen later that day, I didn't pick up. I didn't need to hear whatever excuse she had prepared. They wanted a fight. They would get one. They thought they could use power to control me forever. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. 3 weeks after filing my objection, the court date arrived. I walked into the courtroom, head held high. I was no longer the girl who feared my parents' judgment. They had lost control over me, and today I would make sure they lost it forever. My parents sat on the other side of the room. My mother had carefully crafted her role as the grieving grandmother, her eyes glistening as if she were on the verge of tears. My father looked as cold and indifferent as always, but there was tension behind the lines on his face. Daniel was there too, sitting behind them, arms crossed over his chest, staring at me as if I was the one who had betrayed them. But I hadn't betrayed anyone's. I was simply protecting my real family. The judge skimmed through the documents, then spoke. My mother was the first to take the stand. "Your Honor," she began, voice trembling just enough to seem sincere, "we are Emma and Lucas's grandparents. We have always loved them and we only want the opportunity to be in their lives. Our daughter Ally suddenly cut off contact and refuses to let us see them without any valid reason." Her voice wavered at the perfect moment, her eyes misty with carefully rehearsed emotion. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. But I did know the truth. And this time, I wouldn't let them manipulate the narrative. When it was my turn to speak, I took a slow, steady breath. My voice was calm but firm. "Your Honor, I am opposing this petition for one simple reason. My parents have never truly cared about my children. My mother's eyes widened. Ally, how can you say that? I turned to her, meeting her gaze head-on. Maybe you should let the court decide that. Then I presented my evidence. Pushpin a text from my mother, stating outright that my children weren't the right fit for their perfect family dinner. Pushpin an email from my father, requesting my help just days after they cut me off, proving they saw me as nothing more than free labor. Pushpin side-by-side photos of Christmas gifts, Daniel's children receiving carefully selected expensive presents, while my children were given thoughtless, last-minute tokens. The judge studied the documents carefully before looking up at my parents. You claim to love these children, he said, his tone even but firm, but I see no evidence of genuine care. What I do see is a clear pattern of favoritism and exclusion. Do you have anything to say in your defense? My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My father's fists clenched, his face pale. They knew. They knew they had lost. After a long, heavy pause, the judge set down his pen. After reviewing the evidence, I see no grounds to grant visitation rights. Petition denied. I closed my eyes as a wave of relief washed over me. I had one. As I walked out of the courtroom, my mother rushed after me, gripping my arm. Ally, please don't do this, we're family. Once those words might have made me hesitate. But not today. I gently pried her fingers away. You're right, Mom, we were family, but you broke that. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean to, I just wanted things to go back to the way they were. I let out a quiet laugh. No, Moms, you don't want things to go back. You want them your way, but you don't get to control me anymore. My father stood a few steps behind her, his face unreadable. Daniel was next to him, arms still crossed, his expression cold. They all stared at me like I was a stranger. And I realized that was exactly what I wanted. I turned away and stepped outside, where Liam was waiting for me, arms open. Emma and Lucas ran toward me, throwing themselves into my embrace. And I knew in that moment that I had chosen the right family. After that day, I never heard from them again. No texts from my mother. No calls from Daniel. No guilt trips from my father. Only silence. But this time, I wasn't afraid of it. One morning, as I sat on the porch with my coffee, Emma ran up to me holding out a drawing. Mommy, look, I drew our family. I glanced down at the paper. In it, there were 4 figures, me, Liam, Emma, and Lucas, hand in hand, standing under a bright yellow sun. No grandparents. No Daniel. No one else but us. I smiled, pulling her into my arms. You know what, sweetheart, I whispered. You got it exactly right, this is our family. She grinned, her little arms tightening around my neck. And I knew I had done the right things. No more fear. No more pain. No more longing for approval from people who never truly loved me. I had chosen my path, and I would never look back.